So in this segment, we're going to be talking about essentially the boss of M&S failing to understand anything to do with the single market and the customs union. Specifically, I think the single market in this case. I don't, I'm no expert on either of them, to be fair, but I don't run a multi-million-pound business and have to make key decisions that are going to impact, thousands of people. That's not me, Chief. I make crappy videos on YouTube. So, bureaucratic. So he's talking about working with the EU to get rid of border checks, essentially, or lessen them, when the simple fact is we didn't have any border checks before, or we had really minimal, extremely minimal checks whilst we were a member of the EU, because we were a member of the single market and the customs union. Unless my guy is pushing to rejoin the single market unless my guy is saying we should join the single market or the customs union, he should sit outside. So bureaucratic rigidity threatens to condemn this country and the EU itself to a wholly needless crisis over trade between the UK and the Brussels-ruled bloc. So what I would say is it going to doom the EU? No, they're not the ones really struggling from this. It's the UK. The UK haven't actually done any import checks yet. So what that means is the EU isn't being damaged by checks, is it? It's really the UK predominantly, especially as supply chains have moved around to make it easier for EU countries to import from Ireland and Northern Ireland rather than going through GB. So, bit embarrassing on your part, Mr. Archie. Marks and Spencer's chairman, Archie Norman, dissects the problem and warns of dire consequences to both sides if it is not quickly resolved. I mean, it's only one side taking the damage, mate, at the moment. He says border inspection arrangements have been set up to fail, being wholly at odds with the modern world. Yeah, because Brexit is wholly at odds with the modern world. As we move into a world that's far more interconnected, with more and more countries entering trading blocs, we have decided to go the opposite way and leave the world's most powerful and large trading bloc. So, again, your beef is not with the EU, your beef is with the British government, if you could get any beef in this country, because of all the production issues. Thanks to obsolete rules drawn up nearly a quarter of a century ago, when computers were still comparatively a minor feature of life, British exports to the EU were already being pointlessly hampered by multiple demands of paperwork that will mostly never be read. I mean, it is read, it's checked over, so what are you talking about? It's not like they just quickly look, oh yeah, here we go, 300 papers, boom, you're through. It's obviously looked at, you dunderhead. Mr. Norman, a former MP who almost uniquely in this country combines the direct business experience of the direct experience of Parliament, which is a load of baloney, and also business, which he clearly has very little business expertise, because if I were him, I would have hired some experts, or I would have followed trade experts on Twitter to understand the problems that we're currently facing. If he had done that, he would not be in the mess he is in now, and he wouldn't have wasted 30 million on export checks of goods going from GB to NI. He would have known to move production to NI and to mainland Ireland to avoid a lot of the red tape for getting goods into Northern Ireland. So, massive clown, this guy. He reveals that M&S lorries now need around 700 pages of documentation to pass through EU customs controls imposed since Brexit, imposed since we left the single market and the customs union. That's the point I'd stress here. It didn't have to be this way, but, because of you guys, it had to be this way. This folly is already delaying fresh food, so making it less fresh and undermining one of the main purposes of such checks to ensure high health standards and safety standards. Well, we've already seen the UK try to change the grading of certain grade B waters to grade A waters to allow those goods to be exported into the EU. We've already seen the UK set up a trade deal with Australia, which could potentially allow hormone beef into the UK. So no, the UK is constantly hinting at deregulation. So I would not be so sure we would have the same health standards and safety standards the EU has, and that's why you have these checks. When you're not a member of the single market and the customs union, things get checked regardless, because we're not trusted anymore. We're not aligned anymore. We wanted to make our own rules. We wanted to be big boys, and this is the cost of being a big boy and not being part of the group. It is especially nonsensical since the country's food standards have long been the best in the world and have not declined since we regained our independence. But we've also authorised, or at least we're going to authorise, pesticides that aren't allowed in the EU. So again, we are constantly hinting at deregulation. Yes, we have not done so en masse yet, but why would the EU take the chance? Just start doing export checks now. Have all the facilities in place now. Because Why not? We've left the single market and customs union. This is not a punishment. This is just as a result of our own mistake, our own folly. In October, as the grace period in the Brexit talks come to an end, we are supposed to impose our own similar tiresome and self-harming restriction on goods coming into the country from the EU. No, my friend. These are WTO rules that all countries have to be treated the same unless you have trading arrangements. We only have a free trade agreement with the EU, just like Canada does, just like Japan do. And all of those goods from those countries get checked. So this argument he's making here that these are self-harming, yes they are, but this is as a result of Brexit. Like, you can't spin it as the EU being dumb by doing this. These are the rules. Third countries' products get checked, regardless of how good their standards are. Goods from New Zealand are still being checked once they go to the EU. New Zealand even has an equivalency agreement with the EU, but goods are still checked. Certain goods are still checked, regardless of the agreement, because that's the way countries are. In fact, none of this is a surprise to trade experts or civil servants or diplomats. Is it because they knew what they were talking about and you had no idea what you were talking about? And you still have no idea what you are talking about. He blames Michel Barnier, who has openly declared his candidacy for the French presidency and perhaps thinks his ambition will be helped in the coming vote by a reputation of giving the English Rosbiffs a hard time. I mean, he didn't give us a hard time. He stayed in constant negotiations with us. He did not give us a hard time. If anything, he could have given us a much more difficult time by saying that, look, once we agree the divorce bill, that's when trade negotiations happen. And he was in constant negotiations regarding the divorce bill, constantly talking to us. And when it came to the negotiations, he could have said, look, this is the deal. These are the things we're going to make compromises on. You come back to the table and when you want to talk to us. But instead, he was in constant talks with, that guy, David Frost, in negotiations, being a nice guy, constantly talking about the issues and trying to get stuff resolved. To argue that Michel Barnier was a bad guy during the negotiations is very dim, when the real bad guy was Lord Frost. Barnier did an admirable job given the idiots he had to deal with, especially since Theresa May was saying to Merkel, give us a deal. What's your offer? It's like, no mate, you wanted to leave, you give us your offer. What do you want to happen from here? What does Brexit actually mean? This guy, the M&S guy, goes on to say there are always too much politics and too little trade and diplomacy in these talks. Is like, yes, because Brexit is political. Like, I don't know how you don't understand that. Brexit was to move away from the EU and move to be, on our own. That's political. This was dangerous but easy to ignore when the rigid EU-UK border was just a theoretical problem. No, because you were warned. You were warned. It's not theoretical because we know how the EU treats other third countries. We know this. So you could have easily have said, look, this is how the EU treats Japan. Japan has a free trade deal with the EU. So the EU are going to do the exact same thing to us once we become a third country. It's not theory, bro. It's reality. But now that is far from practical and about to grow into a bigger one, it must be reopened and addressed fully before both sides are gravely damaged. Again, this will do damage to the EU, no doubt, once import checks start happening or export checks of EU goods to GB start happening. It will do damage, but this is the cost of having the rules out. All third countries have to be treated the same. This is the way it is. If you have problems with that, take it up with the WTO. Honestly. So stupid. The easiest approach and the one most likely to avoid posturing by Brussels must be one of modernisation. The use of electronic tracking and checking instead of paperwork is a badly needed reform. The EU already allow electronic paperwork to happen. Like, that's just us not getting there. The EU have pushed this since, I think, 2016 for third countries. So that's a load of baloney. The idea of, an electronic border. Which country has an electronic tracking and checking system instead of paperwork? Which one? Point to one. I dare you. Which one country that is not part of a trading bloc has this system? None. And would simply bring this important activity up to the standards of the present day. A load of rubbish. Norman's sensible suggestion that the EU accepts equivalency for our quality and health controls may be harder to achieve, but is rational and workable. No, it's not, because we keep threatening we're going to lower standards. How can you get an equivalency deal based on us threatening to lower standards? It doesn't make sense. That's why they're asking us to get a Swiss-style agreement when the EU standards change, our standards change. That's what the EU want because they don't trust us, and rightfully so. So this argument here, null and void. He goes on to say this country's goodwill and its desire to trade profitably with its friends and neighbours is not in doubt. I mean, it is, because we have shown very little goodwill to our so-called friends, especially over the Northern Ireland Protocol, which we'll be talking about in a few weeks' time, where the Frost is saying the UK is running out of goodwill, and the Northern Ireland Protocol is going to cause long-term damage, despite the fact that we proposed the Northern Ireland Protocol, negotiated it, and then voted on it, calling it a great deal. So again, absolute stupidity. And he goes on to say, and we are sure that most people and leaders in the EU feel the same. Let's act together for the good of the same. So do you know what you can do, mate? You could push the government to join the single market and the customs union. That would alleviate a lot of your problems, especially considering you're that guy who's trying to, as Dimitri points out regarding M&S, hard to think of a business model less viable than trying to move heavily mixed consignments of ready-to-eat food across a goods border, like having everyone on your team commute daily via the international arrivals line at Luton on expired North Korean passports, i.e. it's not going to work. It doesn't make sense. If you think about something like a ham and cheese sandwich, the ham will have to be checked and verified where it comes from. The same with the cheese. It's still an animal byproduct. So again, that's why he has to go through so much paperwork to prove where all of those specific things that are going to be checked come from. And, this guy, the M&S guy, he just doesn't get it. He's failed to understand the customs union and the single market. He fails to understand why there are checks there. And to have this guy in charge of such a big kind of iconic British business, if I was an M&S shareholder, I'd be calling for this guy to go, because he has no idea what he's talking about, honestly. Just another guy who's going to get a lot of press time, who has no idea what doesn't understand trade. He makes a lot of money. If I were him, I would spend some money, and I would either follow these trade experts on Twitter, or I would hire them to get their expertise on how can you get around this. My advice would be, if you're going to export any sandwiches to the EU, I would just get them manufactured in Northern Ireland, honestly. Start producing more stuff in Northern Ireland. That way you can export to Ireland and to France, trade border free. Yes, the travel time is longer, but you avoid the trade border and all the paperwork. And you can export those same goods into GB. That's my advice to you, pal. That's free, by the way. I ain't going to charge you for that. Even though you got the money to obviously pay for that advice. I'm no trade expert. I have no expertise in anything. And yet I could see the issues with this. Why? Because I follow actual trade experts, like Mr. Dimitri. Anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.